So is AAA gaming dying as an art form? It seems within the last few years, AAA gaming has been filled with controversy, greedy microtransactions, and exploitive loot boxes. While indie games have been exploding since 2012 with the game Slender Man and 2 years later with the game FNAF, a game made by a dying indie developer who intended for it to be his last game before he quit, but instead the game spiraled in popularity and actually made his career. We also see a lot more people favor indie games than AAA developers. Even though by all logic a game that has a ton of money invested into it should do better than a game that has little to no money invested into it. So let's talk about that. So remember that FNAF game I talked about? Yeah, that game was great. But then it got a sequel, and then another sequel, and then another one, and another one. And then it came out with pointless merchandise. Then it spawned a book series that had more sequels than the original games. But I think there's a difference between why this gets a sequel and why this gets a sequel. The reason games like FNAF get so many more sequels is because this world has so much more lore that is yet to be uncovered. While the reason Star Wars gets so many games is because it's profitable. While don't get me wrong, the end goal of every company is to get a profit, the way EA does it is way more exploitive. I mean, one of the main reasons a lot of people say AAA gaming is dying is because they'll take really good franchises and drive them into the ground with pointless sequels and merchandise. Listen, I arguably could make this whole video about microtransactions. The greedy way they're marketed, the pointless cosmetics, the pay-to-win games, they all are greedy tactics that are completely reprehensible. But I do want to make a distinction here. I think games like Fortnite actually have very tame microtransactions. Because in games like Fortnite, microtransactions are an option. They don't give you any advantages in the game, they just make you look cooler. They're just cosmetics. Also, with games like Fortnite, it's completely understandable to have microtransactions, because that's what the game's built upon. While the game does have a sort of story mode, most people probably don't even know it exists. This is why you might not hear about people complaining about the microtransactions in, for example, Clash of Clans. The game is free, so gamers gotta realize that this is the only way for the developers to actually make money off the game they make. But I think the argument is very different when you start putting these charges into $60 games that you paid for. Now, I am not criticizing microtransactions in multiplayer games. Games like Call of Duty actually make it very tame. These unlockables are very easy to get, and at most it would take you a couple hours to get them. But microtransactions in single-player only games, especially story-based games, is obviously atrocious. The game Metal Gear Survive, which came out in 2018, features a currency called SV coins that can help you get tools and stuff that helps you throughout the campaign. For a $40 game that you paid money for. 10 out of 10 game of the year! It seems within the last 10 years, indie games have been exploding, especially in the horror genre with games like FNAF and Doki Doki Literature Club, games that have deep lore. Unlike other parts in this video, this part will be more on the good stuff of modern gaming, but it will still be about how AAA gaming is dying. You see, AAA gaming doesn't really have this lore-rich games that other games have. It seems like every week the channel The Game Theorist has a new FNAF video, but it also seems to be about cooperative play. It seems to be more popular in indie games and not as popular in big multiplayer games like Call of Duty. While I did make a video on this, I do think this has an effect on AAA gaming. How many times do you hear people from the older generation talk about how the game GoldenEye was so good? Or Halo? While I don't want to dwell on co-op too much, because as said, I already have a video on it, I do think the absence of split-screen multiplayer disappearing from games has an effect on the AAA gaming industry, but still seems to be there in indie games. But I also want to focus on community engagement in the game. You know, not just playing a game with a friend that you're right next to, but learning more about the game from the community. It seems like indie games these days are the only place you can go to not have microtransactions crammed down your throat. Also, with the rise of the internet, I think it gives a huge market to indie games. The more I think about it, the more I kind of realize that some of these indie games would have gone nowhere without the internet. A long time ago, when you wanted to make a video game for consoles, you would need a marketing campaign. You needed publishers and funding. But nowadays, it seems like any old guy in his basement can make a viral indie game in a month, with substantially less resources and no corporate investors to please. Indie developers also don't have to worry about censorship because they don't have any publishers to please. Well, besides Microsoft and PlayStation. They also don't have to pitch their ideas to anyone. They can make anything they want and don't have to hear from no one. Don't get me wrong, I love Nintendo. My birthday was a couple of weeks ago and I actually did ask for a Switch, along with my twin brother. But one of the problems we had was the fact that the Switch didn't come with any games, which would have been unheard of just a couple years ago. And it seems like Nintendo fans just eat it up, kinda just going along with whatever Nintendo says. Combined with the fact that every game on the Nintendo Switch is $60, this seems like a huge problem for the consumer. Especially when it comes to games that released 4 years ago, you know, when the Switch launched. I recently bought Super Mario Odyssey for $60. A game that released day and day with the Switch is still $60 4 years into its life. This seems like another thing that just would have been unheard of in the last generation of consoles. Well, mostly. I think the $60 price tag should be reserved for games that just released, not games that have been out for the entirety of my high school career. By the way, I'm a senior now. And it seems like Nintendo just justifies the $60 price tag for 4-year-old games by saying it's a home console game and a portable game, so that means it should be charged as 2 games. This practice of releasing all their games for $60 regardless of when they released would only make sense if you were providing the console release of the game. But no, you're providing the portable release regardless of if it's on the TV or if it's on the go. The only difference between the Switch on the TV and the Switch on the go is the resolution. It doesn't change anything. I think part of the problem is the fact that Nintendo has a monopoly on being Nintendo. No other game company has this many recognizable franchises. I mean, what do PlayStation and Microsoft have? Halo, Ratchet & Clank? For every Halo franchise there is, Nintendo has 6 new franchises that they've made themselves and in-house, especially with characters like Mario, which are synonymous with gaming. And out of any company, I think Nintendo has the most brand recognition. You can talk to anybody about what Mario is, but not as many people might know what Halo is. And that's part of the problem with why Nintendo has a monopoly on being Nintendo. Nintendo has made themselves so unique from the competition that it's hard to compete with them. This is why during console wars, people are always talking about PlayStation versus Xbox, because Nintendo is in its own category. It's not really there to compete with those console games. It's essentially its own market. I don't think anybody buys Nintendo consoles to play games such as Assassin's Creed, because you would get a better experience on literally anything else that's released on. And it seems like Nintendo has always been this way. I mean, look how many handhelds they made.
While AAA gaming seems to be dying artistically, I do think there's a way to get out of it.
We talked about indie devs and how they're still making games with unique gameplay. They seem to be exploding the most in the VR market. And while I do already have a video on virtual reality, I do think the future of artistically driven gaming is in the VR market. And it's because the VR market isn't as corrupted as the AAA gaming market. How many times have you heard companies like Activision or Blizzard do horrible things to their employees or even ban them for political speech? This behavior is almost completely absent in that market because VR games are made by small teams. Well, sometimes. But to AAA developers, you are seriously just a number. You are infinitely replaceable and expendable. And it's kind of sad because companies like Activision were actually started because developers of video games weren't being credited for their work. The company Activision actually was started when Atari refused to credit any of their developers for the games they made. This seems insane when you look at the current scandals that are going on at Activision, with the company environment frequently said to be like a front house. Especially when just a couple years ago, Activision was on top of the gaming market. And that's the end of the video, guys. Sadly, the videos will no longer be uploaded to IOX. Me and those guys have separated. I quit. No harsh feelings between me and Alid Buzzy and Blocks. I still love all those guys. I'd like to thank WolfPlay13 for editing the outro to this video. Anyway, guys, I'm actually looking for another channel to actually post Jeremy Explained. So if you guys got a multi-channel network, then I'd love to join and upload my videos there. I think these videos are great to make, and I just want to upload them somewhere else in my personal channel. But for right now, this is only going to be uploaded to my personal channel, but I will submit this video to auditions for multi-channel networks. Kind of like IOX was. And make sure to tell me what you guys think in the comments below, and to like and subscribe. I'm actually really curious to hear what your guys' opinions on the AAA gaming market today is. Love you guys, bye!